change management is the bridge between the idea of change and the lived experience of it.
Every change aspect of an organization should become a part of its governance.
So, even a well designed transformation can weaken quietly from within if people don't have the capacity to absorb it.
Change management is the one which closes the gap between the decision and the value it creates on the ground.
Change doesn't stick because it was announced well, it sticks because it's reinforced consistently. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Change That Sticks. If you have worked inside any organization long enough, you've probably seen change announced with energy, new priorities, new tools, and new structures. But what really happens after the announcement? When the town hall ends, when the slides are archived, when the teams return to their day to day activities, does it settle or it slowly fades? I'm Shikha, and through our work at VCreaTek, we often sit in that space between the leadership intent and the execution reality, helping organizations not just launch change, but actually embed it. Today's conversation is about what really makes change stick. And I'm joined by two people who have seen this up close from different vantage points. We have Dhrumal Parekh with us. Dhrumal is part of the leadership team at VCreaTek, serving as Vice President Sales, where he drives business growth and client strategy across markets. In addition, he heads VCreaTek's change management practice and established Change Management Center of Excellence, also known as CMCOE, supporting both internal transformation and close client engagements. Welcome, Dhrumal. Joining him is Pranita Rao. Pranita is a precise certified change practitioner who works at the intersection of leadership intent and execution reality. She partners closely with leaders and teams during complex transformations, focusing on adoption, alignment, and sustained behavioral shifts, ensuring change doesn't go live, but actually settles into day to day activities. Welcome, Pranita. So, before we move on to the questions, I want to pause on something very simple but very tricky. We use the term change management often, but for someone who may not work in this space every day, who's listening to the word change management for the first time, what does it really mean? Pranita, if you may.
At its simplest form, change management is about helping people move from knowing that something is changing to actually working differently because of it. So organizations are very good at designing new strategies or tools, but they only create as much value as much as the people understand them and trust them and start using them confidently. So you can, in simple terms, you can say that change management is the bridge between the idea of change and the lived experience of it.
Okay. And Rumal, from your point of view?
So I'll give you a business lens to it. Ideally, in a nutshell, what it does is it actually you know saves your ROI. I mean, every project or every decision is based on ROI in a business. So as Pranita mentioned, right, that most organizations are pretty good at strategy already. Designing is not an issue. The problem happens between the strategy being designed and the one which is being lived, as Pranita mentioned. But most of the times this gap is people gap and not a design gap. So what I feel is a change management, how it comes into the picture is it helps you protect the investment. Helps you protect ROI that we already made. It could be a new system, it could be a new function, it could be a new market model, whatever that is. We the business allocates capital to it, and the value only it gets realized and arrives when people actually start using it and they change how they actually work from the old ways of doing things to the new ways of doing things. So, and it's not when the project closes that it's like a tick mark that okay, the project is done and we are good to go. So for me, change management is the one which closes the gap between the decision and the value it creates on the ground. And at the same time, it's not an add-on, right? It actually determines whether the strategy was even worth building in the first place. That's
Okay.
it. Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
So yeah, so what I'm hearing from both of you is like change management is not only just an announcement or just a, what do you say, a pointer to be added to the organizational level. It is about what actually changes or shifts after the change management is brought into the place. So to take that further, let's move on from definition to reality. Pranita, I have a question for you. When you step into transformation initiative, what tells you that change is being experienced and not just rolled out?
So I know change is being experienced when it shows up in behavior and not just in communications or in stats or analytics. It needs to actually show up in patterns, it needs to show up in behavior. So when people stop talking about timelines or the tools that are being released and they start talking about what this really means to their priorities or their workloads or even in general the larger teams, or if people start adjusting priorities or questioning trade-offs or expressing concerns without about the impact, so that's when it is real.
Okay,
That's where I think it makes the real sense.
correct. Like that's a powerful shift when change, stops being from being informational and starts becoming more personal. That is where you can see that, yeah, it is not just an experience, it is being rolled out in general. And once that happens, I guess leadership intent becomes even more visible. So, Drumil, from your perspective, what separates a transformation that's treated a real strategic shift from one that becomes another initiative?
Mm, I think the first few weeks are very important, actually, if you just analyze them. Not from the announcement point of view, but actually after a few weeks from the announcement. If an initiative is really a strategic one and not just another initiative, what will happen is the leadership's behavior will actually be the same no matter what happens, be it under the pressure or be it otherwise. Decisions will not bend when things get busy. Things will not get deprioritized, or because of some other pressures or because of some sales pressure or quarterly pressures, whatever may be the case. It'll always be the priority. uh, what happens in an initiative when it's just another initiative is because things get delegated, they get delegated too soon, they get delegated too fast. For the leadership, it's just a matter of a kickoff, for ticking mark or checking mark a checklist, and then they just move on. And it gives a signal that it's in an operational initiative, not a strategic one, because things go as per the convenience, and as things go become difficult, the priorities change and there's no continuity. What differentiates for me is the continuity between the two.
Okay. Yeah.
the one the ones which are real strategic ones will have that continuity that I'm talking about, and it'll not actually get delegated too soon.
Okay. Okay. So what you're describing is less about messaging and more about the behavior that happens under the pressure. And when that signal reaches the team, that does not land uniformly. So that is how I think things are being measured or things are being, taken into consideration when, that's from one that just becomes another initiative. Pranita, I would like your point here that when teams pause or seem unsure during change, what are they usually trying to communicate through it?
um, when teams pause, they're really communicating that something is not right or something is unclear or risky. So you can think of it as that they're not trying to resist the change, but they're trying to protect their own priorities, their own deliveries, or they're trying to avoid mistakes, or even understand what are the consequences of following this new path, whether it's a new tool or a new process. So a pause often means that, in their language, it often means help me understand what this really means for my priorities. And that is what we need to clarify as change professionals in our communications, in our positioning, when we talk about the change. This is what they really want. What is it in for me? What does this mean for my priorities? And that's when the real shift happens.
Correct. Like that pause is often misinterpreted. Like it is
Yes.
from outside, it may look it is resistance, but actually, what you're describing is like feels more like a risk management point of view on the change management aspect as well. So when hesitation exists across multiple functions or regions, alignment becomes even more complex. So based on that, Drumal, I would like to know your view that when transformations span across multiple regions or functions, what leadership behavior ensures alignment at a scale?
Ideally, in a nutshell, I would say consistency. What Pranita mentioned, right? The hesitation. For me, from change management point of view, the opposite of hesitation is consistency. So what normally happens in big changes which are at scale is people just think that we can do it by just over communicating. They feel that everything can be compensated with over communication. If we just keep reinforcing the same thing again and again, it'll kind of stick and it'll kind of get penetrated with it. That's not the case. What usually happens, and especially from leadership's point of view, is you need to consistent signals. So again, as I said, everybody, all the functions, when the changes are happening at scale, all the functions, all the regions are actually interpreting in their own lenses. There could be cultural shift, there could be cultural ways of interpreting things, there could be different functions interpreting a certain change in different way. But what happens is at the end of the day, if the behavior of all the leaders across all the regions and even let's say departments has that consistent meaning of that change, and they are trying to keep that consistency going, keep I mean trying to keep that consistency on rather than letting it fracture, will happen. So what I've done is, as I said earlier, people just trying to reinforce those change which does not happen. And when even let's say multiple leaders could be interpreting the change in different ways, but at the end of the day, if the messaging is consistent across all the regions, all the teams, and that's where it will stick. And it should be seen in those in the behaviors as well. I mean, when there are meetings happening across different regions, across different departments, all the regions have to speak the same language, all the leaders of the regions have to speak the same language. And it should not happen for a short term as well. It should, because all the big changes happen across months if not years sometimes. And that consistency has to be kept on month after month, quarter after quarter. And that's, you will feel that the behavior which is at scale will definitely stick, and everyone's in alignment to all others.
Yeah, so based on what you just described, I can say that there is something very steady, like you mentioned consistency, which is like in overpower to the intensity of the change. Like when even when there is certain lacks or something, but if the leadership is consistent enough and following a simple goal or simple element, then they can allow things to happen the way they want. Like, there is an alignment, proper alignment, which can be measured. But even if when the alignment exists, it does not always mean that adoption follows. So, Pranita, when organizations measure change, like what is that one metric that they rely too much on?
Definitely usage. I think organizations often rely heavily on logins and completion rates or participation numbers and assume that that is adoption or that is equivalent to adoption. But usage only tells you that people showed up. It definitely tells you that people showed up, but it doesn't really tell you that the behavior has changed or the inherent behavior that needs to be projected or exhibited for this particular change to be successful. It doesn't show that. So the real change shows up in patterns. That is where it really comes about. And there are some questions that we could ask ourselves as change professionals, that are these escalations reducing over time? Are the same clarification questions coming up over and over again? Or are decisions being made without constant leadership intervention? So these are the questions that if we can find answers to, you can subtly find some patterns in there which will show you if adoption has really penetrated well within the teams and not just at the surface level. So these are the signals that are measurable, and this is like just beyond the surface metrics, which will really tell you if change has been adopted in the real sense.
Correct. So, like, there's a quite distinction between the activity and the behavior, right? And that is very much
Right.
important because
Right. So
sometimes,
usage
yeah.
measures activity, but adoption shows up in behavior under pressure. Like when they have their timelines and deadlines, intact, and when they're running against time to complete those deadlines, are they still adhering or complying to your change? Right. That is what shows the real, you know, change or behavior change that has happened.
Correct. So like it's like everything looks successful on paper, but until pressure tests it, it is not like we get to know the results or the outcomes of it.
Right. That's right.
Let's anchor this in something real because theory is one thing and the lived experience is another. So I would like to catch a moment from your experience. Like, can you share a transformation where leadership signals evolved as the work progressed and how that influenced the momentum? Like, Pranita, if you may share your experience.
So I think I can think of one large global transformation that I was part of. The direction was very clear initially. Leadership had aligned on the vision. The roadmap was defined, and the communication was very strong from the top. But as few months pass by, in operational, pressures increase. Right, you have deadlines, quarterly targets, budget scrutiny. There's so many things that keep coming up, and when these competing priorities started appearing, that's when the momentum, I think, began to slow down a bit. And what shifted things wasn't whether, that are we doing another communication post, or are we, adding more collaterals in our change kit, or it was none of that. It was just about how leadership reviewed the situation and took a tough call, and they stuck to it. So that's what really changed. So instead of diluting the scope or postponing the key elements of the project because of competing priorities, like I just mentioned, the leadership reinforced that the original priorities are still intact and are protected. So what that does is it changed something. It changed the energy within the team, within the project members, because then the teams realized that this wasn't temporary and this wasn't negotiable. This wasn't something optional that they had to do. It is something which was good to stay, and momentum returned very organically. And that signal was enough, was consistent enough for people to take this initiative seriously. And I think in large enterprises, these kind of moments matter more than the actual launch, events or the go lives that we talk about. These
Mhm.
silent decisions that are made, they actually matter much more than the real launch events.
Correct. Correct. Drumal, one from your experience, if you want to share.
So, so we have a very active change management COE, right? Center of Excellence. I'll actually share one experience from that itself, from our own journey. Actually, it's actually a part of all of us, our journey. So we had a mandate actually, or rather not a mandate. We were thinking, contemplating of starting a change management center of excellence. And the early months, obviously, as usually with all the projects, the conviction was very strong, and we had a very good energy. But obviously, as things moved on and weeks went by and months went by, the complexity surfaced. We had different sales priorities, especially myself. We had delivery commitments. People were part of different projects. We had different client engagements, and everybody was competing for bandwidth, right? Because it was a center of excellence, which was a different group that we were trying to incorporate. But that's where actually I thought the leadership signal matters the most. It would have been very easy to just kind of uh, you know slow down and say, let's just wait till things settle down, and we'll just come back to it a few months down the lane, or we'll just come back a few weeks down the lane. But instead, what we tried and we did, and we were quite successful, is we kind of protected the foundational elements, not obviously at the same speed and velocity, but obviously consistently. And that's exactly what I
Yeah.
mentioned earlier as well. What happened was, how did the COA came into being was it being stop being a project with a deadline to a practice with a purpose. And that's when actually I could see the change in people's behavior. People could own it. People owned it differently.
Yeah.
Different parts of the team owned it differently because they could see that the leadership is not treating this project as an optional project, but it is something that they really believe in. And what I always felt is the signal that you normally give, the leaders give while things are difficult, is the one that shapes culture, and not the one which you normally see at those kickoff events and those at launch where the energy is really high, but it kind of fizzles down after a few months. And that definitely gives those mixed feelings and mixed emotions to the team, and they can't really connect to that. So that's one of the experiences I think is worth mentioning here. So yeah.
So you both have different experiences, but somehow I see that the difficulty, that revealing the commitment and feeling consistent was something that, or maybe experiencing the consistency was something which helped you both to gain the change that you were trying to bring onto the table. Uh, which is a good factor. But there are certain elements which leadership alignment cannot alone guarantee the sustainability. So, Pranita, beyond leadership, like what else weakens the transformation that goes on and the initiatives that have been taking place?
So I
Okay.
think change fatigue, that is one thing that can really weaken a transformation beyond anything, because it's not visible resistance. You can fight resistance when you see it surfacing, in form of people who are not complying to your initiatives, or people who are not interested. You can do that because you can see it. But change fatigue is something which is not visible. It's just accumulation of information, or overload of information, which becomes a fatigue, and that's not visible, and which is not visible, it's a little difficult to fight against. So teams are often navigating multiple shifts nowadays, right? Like multiple deliverables, multiple projects at the same time. So even a well designed transformation can weaken quietly from within if people don't have the capacity to absorb it. And that's why it's very important that this is not to be treated as a disagreement. It's not like they don't want to agree to you, or they don't want to comply with you. It is just pure exhaustion. It's human. It's pure depletion and pure exhaustion. So when change completes or competes with delivery pressure, something really has to give in at the end of the day. So the way we prevent it is not with more communication pushes, or it's not to reinforce again and again. How can we curb this is with prioritization, so sequencing the change thoughtfully, and then reinforcing fewer things but with more consistency. So instead of reinforcing everything, you pick and choose what you want to reinforce, but do that consistently, day in and day out. And and those activities can make the change and make it sustainable. So sustainable change is often less about the intensity and more about the pacing. So how do you pace your um your initiatives? How do you pace the way you interact with the audience? All that matters. So I think, yes, change fatigue is something which can weaken transformations beyond leadership.
So that's subtle because fatigue doesn't usually announce itself loudly. It kind of accumulates, and once the absorption capacity is like at the saturation point, it just bursts out, and that is where you see things going, messy, which makes the organization readiness even more critical. So, based on that, I would like to know, Rumel, your point of view then on like what tells you that an organization is ready to treat change management as a capability and not just a project support. Because we have seen people naming change management as just a support element to their organizations. So, I would like to know your view on this.
Interesting. So something that we've been trying to do at VCreaTek, right? There are not just it's not just one thing. It's a few things combined together. And primarily, if I have to think about it, it's approximately major three things that comes to my mind. You know, if if it's not just any other project, right, then the change management has to happen, has a discussion much before even the project plan comes into the being. People will start asking questions. If before any question, before even we think about those changes there, how will we ask people to come together on this particular change at the design stage, not after the change has already been conceptualized. Before even any change has been thought of, if the leaders are asking if this change makes sense, how will people converge on this? How will we bring people together? Will it kind of fracture their views on it? And if that discussion happens at a very early stage before even a change is thought of, I feel the leadership is actually thinking change as a capability. Second, I feel is also investing, especially
Okay.
investing in the internal capabilities. If we train our own people, if we are not just considering change as just an exercise, as just a project that we can bring in consultants from outside and we can just get it done with, just to, again, I always use this word, if it's just a check mark on a to-do list, then you'll always invest in people's training and people's capability. And that's where we'll feel that people actually think about that, they live that culture of change being a part of the entire organization as a capability. So it'll be part of, it'll become a resident in our company rather than a rented house in a company. And third, finally, what I feel is uh, every change aspect of an organization should become a part of its governance. uh, we all know governance is primarily about budgets, it's about timelines, it's about all those things. When we start speaking change in the same breath as budget and timelines, then we start considering change as an equally important aspect and a capability, just like the other aspects of a project. And so to sum it up, there are three different things, right? As I said, the early involvement of the leaders, the internal ownership, which shows into the uh, which shows into the internal leadership, which shows by investing into the capabilities, and finally the governance integration. So finally it stops being as a project support and starts being an organizational capability.
Yeah, correct. So the change management gets invited in like after the strategy is defined, after the direction is set. But yet, the earlier it is considered, it is the organization becomes less reactive. So it's like if I may have to sum up your answer, can I say that change management is a mindset? It's not a toolkit. Like, when needed, then we can just use tools out of it. It's not like that. It's about the mindset. It is about the base that establishes as a capability for any organization to accept and adopt the new initiatives or the new elements.
So it's a mindset, but at the same time you need to see if that mindset is in place or not. And that's when I say you
Yeah,
normally see with these three signals, right? And that's how it is. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Okay, okay. Okay, so moving forward, before we move on to the last questions, I want to shift some gears slightly. We'll do a reflective question and answers round. No right or wrong answers, just first instincts, whatever comes to your mind. And these are about, you can say whatever comes to your mind. We can keep it brief, and if you want to say add a line or something, feel free to add it. Okay, so you ready?
Let's go.
Yeah.
Okay. One word that best describes how change feels.
Uneven.
It's layered.
Okay. One thing people underestimate about large transformations.
Time to build belief.
Okay.
For me, it's the emotional effort that goes into it. People often underestimate that.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing that matters more than the plans acknowledge.
Clarity from leadership.
For me, it's the consistency. Initial gung ho approach doesn't work. You need to have consistent signals.
Right. One sign that change is actually settling in.
Ownership, when people start owning it.
Okay.
Confidence, the confidence with which people start taking decisions.
Okay. What breaks down first when change is not landing?
I think it's trust.
For me, it'll still be the same, which was the previous answer, which is confidence. What I feel is people will start becoming less confident in taking those decisions, and it'll start showing first.
So I guess confidence and trust go side by side. Like if there's no confidence, there's no trust. And if there's no trust, there's no confidence. It's like the vice versa of each other, right? What do leaders expect too early?
I think they expect the certainty of how this is going to end right in the beginning, So uh, they want it all right in the beginning.
Hmm.
So again, normally initially people momentum for me it's momentum. Why momentum is people, the leaders feel that if there is a good momentum in the beginning, it'll be a good success by default, but that's not the case. You need to be consistent. So momentum is what people expect too early. Momentum builds
Yeah,
up gradually.
correct, correct. What keeps people engaged when change feels slow?
Um, Progress,
Okay.
even a little progress, even if you show them 5% progress every day, that'll give them the motivation to quit.
Right.
For me it's visibility, just showing up, right? If leaders just show up that it matters to them,
Yeah.
it automatically boils, I mean, goes to the team as well, that it matters,
Mhm.
and by just being visible.
Yeah. Okay. What creates resistance even with positive intent?
Ambiguity, because if the message is ambiguous um, right from the beginning, that definitely shows during the journey of change. So you have to be
Yeah.
crystal clear at the beginning.
Okay.
For me, sometimes it's the silence from the leaders. Sometimes the leaders feel that I'll be silent and let team take over, but sometimes it can be misinterpreted by saying that it doesn't matter to the leadership. So silence can be sometimes, even with a positive intent, can create a resistance as well.
Yeah. Okay. What makes change manageable?
Prioritization. Uh, Once you prioritize what is needed today, you can build on it every single day. So prioritization, you don't have to get overwhelmed and take everything in at the same time. So prioritization definitely helps to manage change.
Differently, I think similarly, I think pacing, right? If you prioritize well and if you pace it accordingly, then I think it becomes manageable. There will be times where you will pace it fast. There will be times where you pace it slow. Pacing is very important.
Okay. And the last question is, what tells you the change has moved from effort to a habit?
When it's the default, when it becomes second nature.
When it becomes instinctive, right? It should not be thought of. It has to be just instinct.
Yeah, correct. So that brings us to the end of the reflective round. It's interesting that how certain words kept repeating, like clarity, confidence, consistency, and none of them are technical. They all are behavioral. And that's say something that what makes the transformation sustain is like, these are the elements that helps us in, sustaining the transformation, sustaining the change, and sustaining how the organization actually work. Okay. Coming on to the last element of this particular episode, let's close with one thought, final thought. Um, Pranita, I'll ask you one question. As transformation becomes continuous rather than episodic, what's the one capability organizations must build to ensure that change truly sticks?
Adaptability, because not just the ability to launch change, but the ability to absorb change is very important without losing the stability. So organizations need to build the muscle of adjusting priorities or reinforcing direction, and should be able to recalibrate without creating panic amongst their employees. So because
Mhm.
in a world of continuous transformation, so you have such agile initiatives going on parallelly, so many competing priorities. The question is not can we change? It's more like, can we change consistently without exhausting our people? That's very important, because the workforce is what is the backbone of the company. You cannot exhaust them and expect or anticipate that you're going to make a big change. So that's the capability that makes the change stick, which is adaptability.
Okay. So, like adaptability without instability is a difficult balance to maintain. And as I think that as change becomes more continuous, technology inevitably enters the conversation. Uh, Rumil, looking ahead, I want to know that how do you see technology, particularly AI and data, reshaping the future of change management?
Very positively, honestly. It's really looking really bright. So honestly, the future of change will definitely be increasingly data driven, as everything else is becoming data driven. So we know, right, for example, right now most of the change management work is around observation and intuition. We conduct signals, we conduct surveys, we read people's signals, their behavior, we talk to their teams. All this is very valuable. I'm not undermining that, it's not, that's exactly how it's done, but it's a very lagging indicator. By the time you have detected, the adoption is slipping, it's not on the right track, you've already lost time. And there is very little that you can do to kind of make up for that. But with the help of
Mhm.
AI and NLP and the data analytics, you can actually detect those, you know uh, slipping or the adoption slippage much faster and more precise, especially through a sentiment analysis, some communication patterns and engagement signals. We can see exactly where change is landing, how people are reacting to it, where they are not reacting to it, and that all happens in real time. And that is where the brilliance of AI comes into the picture, where the shift in change management becomes from reactive to predictive. And the biggest opportunity I feel is actually personalization at scale. We spoke about change at scale. We know that every team actually experiences the change very differently, and we all kind of assume that a certain team will react to it very the way we think it to be. However, what with the help of AI and all these tools, we can actually tailor we can tailor make different reinforcement techniques, and we can also give support to the teams depending on how they need it rather than how we want to give it. And that's where I feel the change will happen, from intuitive to less intuitive and more intelligent. And it doesn't mean that the human work will become less or it becomes less valuable, but I feel it become much much more sharper and much more direct and precise. And I think that's where most of the projects fail, and I'm sure the AI will really help in that case.
Yeah, so can I just say that even as change becomes more data driven, the core challenge still comes back to interpretation and the trust of the people. Like technology may sharpen the detection, but I think a behavior still determines the value that it creates, right?
100%, 100%. They are the tool at the
Yeah,
end of the day.
yeah,
We will
correct.
be utilizing these tools to make better decisions, make it faster, make it sharper.
Yeah. Okay. So that brings us to the end of this conversation. What stands out in this conversation is that change is shaped less by announcements and more by everyday leadership, behavior, through decisions, consistency, and their presence over time. Thank you, Pranita and Romil, for sharing such grounded perspectives. And we would love to hear from all of you what leadership behaviors have helped change feel clearer or steadier in your experience. And to everyone listening, change doesn't stick because it was announced well. It sticks because it's reinforced consistently. Until next time, this is Change That Sticks.
Thank you,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank you.
So